Welcome to Prepper Talk Radio. I am Scott, and I've got Shane here in the house. We are the voices of Prepper Talk Radio, radio for the ready-minded here at K-Talk, AM 1640. You can find us on Facebook at Prepper Talk Radio. You can also find us on our website, preppertalkradio.com. Isn't that great how that works? We are excited. We've got another fun show today. This week, we're actually bringing on a guest. I'm going to get him on the line real quick. Jamie, you there?
Yeah, man, I'm right here.
Awesome. All right, I'm going to give you an intro here, and then we're going to run this show into the ground. So, Jamie, this is Jamie Olson. We brought him in today because we're kind of in our look to the past to prepare to the future segment series over the last month and a half, and we're going to try to keep this going for another month and a half or 2 or 3 if we can. We want to get as many old skills as possible on air. And so today, we got Jamie on. And we're going way back, but it's also, I mean, this is a currently existing thing. But let me explain. Jamie's a trapper. Now, Jamie has been trapping in Wyoming for 11 years. Before that, he was a USDA Wildlife Service employee. He's written articles for Dakota Country Magazine, as well as a regular guest on Dakota Prairie Outdoors. And you run Coyote Hunter, and CoyoteHunter.net and BoxCreekOutfitters.com. Is that right?
Yep.
So, and we met through Facebook. I actually stalked and found a trapper with actual experience because I didn't want somebody who's like, I set up a couple snares.
Sure, I know. I could teach you.
I got a skill. I caught a mouse.
You mean like us, right?
Yeah, that basically I didn't want people to just listen to us talking about, I put Dakota Pitfall, whatever traps, Yeah. So this is cool because, ladies and gentlemen, Jamie actually traps most of the year for a living. Right, and then you also do. You're a guide for hunting and some other stuff as well. But your primary thing is trapping. So I wanted to.
2.5 months out of the year, I do the big game hunting. The rest of the time, it's all either I'm on. I work contract work for big lambing, free range lambing operations, and in the winter months, I fur trap. All the bills are paid. I don't have a hammer and nail side job. Everything revolves around hunting.
Wow! So, like when people watch that show, Mountain Men, it's almost what your real life.
Just look at it in Montana, right?
Yeah, right. Like your life is actually the real scenario. Theirs is like the scripted scenario. But this is kind of the fun thing is because you can talk to us and teach us and our listeners what it's really like to be a trapper and the usefulness of it and that's kind of where we wanted to go today is so tell us a little bit about yourself so our listeners kind of chime in better. You've been doing this for over 11 years. Really, how old were you when you got into trapping for the first time?
Oh, I was just a kid, and I was horrible at it. But we grew up with hunting dogs. We had hounds. Mm-hmm. My dad did a lot of we hunted coon with hounds, black and tans and blue checks, and he had some buddies that were really heavy into it. Well, they did some of the night hunts, they're like tournaments. And so I grew up doing that. We did a lot of archery hunting. I got my first archery tag, and I started shooting a bow probably 75, got my first tag in 79. About that time was when I was doing a little bit trapping down by the river. And we grew up on the river bottoms, eastern North Dakota, Goose River. And we did a lot of hunting and fishing when we were growing up. And then when I went to college, I kind of got away from all that stuff for a bit. Moved out to Seattle and got some city living in for a little bit. Moved back when I was about 27, moved back to North Dakota and went right back into the hunting and trapping and such.
I was going to say you
repented. And I was a project manager for a construction company. It destroyed a whole bunch of things. I lost at least my first marriage over it. I quit a really good paying job as a project manager for a construction company, made really good money. I had done that for 16 years. And when I got an opportunity, so I always trapped on this, I always trapped. But, it's a seasonal thing, right? And then a lot of calling, a lot of decoy dogs. I've run decoy dogs for almost 20 years. Anyway, when I got an opportunity to apply for wildlife services, I kind of did it just go through the process. I wasn't really expecting to get an interview. I certainly wasn't thinking I was going to get a job. But I ended up getting the job and quit my job. My wife quit her really good paying job, and we moved to Wyoming. And a significant pay cut. A significant pay cut. But I really wanted an opportunity to get up and do something I was passionate about every day. You know, I always thought I would retire at some point, make a pile of money. You know how that is. I'm going to make a bunch of money and retire, and I'm going to go hunting and fishing, right?
We all want to do that to a degree, right?
I still think I can do that eventually here.
But if you can, instead of just straight retire, if you can move into a lifestyle that actually allows you to do that, where what you're doing supports you, right? That's the key, I think. Like for most of us, you know, my eventual goal is to get off grid and to live a life simplified, and not be in town. You know, I'd like to repent of my city slicker ways, and you know, I'm originally from not a small town, but not a huge town either. I'm originally from Idaho, and we lived next to a farm, and so when I was a little kid, we'd go over to the dairy to get our milk. You know, and we'd trade for stuff sometimes. But most of the time, it was just you'd go to the dairy and buy the stuff, or you'd go over here and do that. And we'd spend a lot of our time camping, and it was a much simpler life. And now it's like we've all got these devices, and we're tethered to society, but we're not communicating in a richly meaningful way. And so, getting back to nature, getting back to more of a rugged lifestyle where it's simple, like you eat what you catch.
Yeah,
like
but it's tough to live in a rugged lifestyle, right? It's not easy, but kind of like you
it's
experience.
Doable though. Like he's doing it now. Our ancestors did it.
Well,
like
yeah, Jamie,
we wouldn't be here if they hadn't done it.
I imagine, Jamie, that you had kind of the experience that I think a lot of people do. They grew up on the farm, they grew up on the ranch, and they say their whole life, I want to get out of here. I want to get to the big city, right? And then you experience that, and then you realize this is crap. I want to get back to my simple life. You repented of those sins and went back to the light. And I think it takes all of us a little bit of that, because I imagine growing up on the farm and then not wanting to leave as a kid. You know, I think that's absolutely natural progression.
I've got friends that stayed. Like they're like, why would I ever want to leave?
I think that's more rare.
This.
And go experience what the normal life that everybody else experienced, because you're told that living on a ranch or on a farm, that's not normal, right? That's not the way most people do it, right?
It's not mainstream.
Not mainstream. There you go. And so you go and you go try the life of everybody else, and if you're lucky, you realize I liked my life before so much better than this life. So I think you're a lucky man to have experienced that and be able to get back to where you wanted to be.
Yeah, I'm really glad I had an opportunity to live out. I moved to Seattle in '92, so I was out there with all the music and stuff. And I grew up in a really musical family. My dad played in a band forever. I played in bands and running around getting paid, going to bars, playing in. First time I got paid playing in a band in a bar, I was 13 years old. I was really into that for a while.
You're like, guys, I've already made it.
When you could get away with that.
That's awesome.
Right. Yeah, I was going to be a rock star. Anyway, so when I moved out to Seattle, it was just a good time to be out there. So I bought a Corvette right away and got myself in debt and chased girls around for 6 years. But coming back home, so I'm really glad I had the opportunity to do that. I'm glad I had an opportunity to do it when I did it. I couldn't ever do that. You know, I couldn't ever see myself living like that again. But I think people should do that. You know, travel around. I've gotten to travel events. I've been to South America. I've been to Europe. You know, I've been,
and I think
I've been able to go out and do some stuff because I was making money back then, so I got to travel. But
so what was
I don't go hunting on the weekends anymore. I don't plan my vacations around hunting. It's just something I do so much, you know. So if I get I'm in the field, give or take, but I'm in the field about 300 days a year, 270 to 310 days a year. I'm in the field.
Now let's talk about field life. So that our listeners can really understand, what does that really mean? What does that entail? I would imagine there's a lot of setting traps and then checking your trap lines. But tell us, kind of go through the process of setting up. You know, when does your year start? When do you start laying traps? How does that all work?
So I would say March 1st is when the contract work starts on sheep ranches. And so you're doing your pre-lambing work. Usually your range lambing, you're starting about May 12th to the 22nd. And we'll usually range lamb around 135 to 145%, give or take. If you were to shed lamb, that's about what it ends up being. So if you got 1,000 ewes out there, you know, then you should have, give or take, about 1,400 lambs on the ground.
Okay.
And so that's what you're doing. You're cleaning up those pre-lambing, and I'm dealing with about 5,500 pairs, give or take. So it's a bunch of sheep, right? That's a lot of sheep.
Yeah.
And it's about 95,000 acres that I work on, you know, contract work.
Okay.
And so in the springtime, when I first move into those properties, typically I'm trapping those for fur throughout the winter. So I've already got a fairly good idea of what's there. You've already identified those animals. And when I say identify those animals, if you're doing things correctly, you should know on that 95,000 acres, I'm generally aware of every coyote that's on the place.
Okay, so
either peripheral or actually living on the property.
Let's step back a second. So you're out there lambing. Why don't you explain exactly what lambing is? So
it's a ewe lamb free-range operation. So free-range, they're just lambing is about as natural of an environment as you can get when you have a domestic stock herd.
Okay.
But they're out in the sage, out in the brush, and they're just lambing on their own. And you'll have a certain death loss that's associated with that based on weather conditions.
So essentially, you're a shepherd. Is that correct?
No, so I'm out. They have shepherds, Peruvians.
Okay.
And so I don't herd sheep. I don't really do anything of them, but I do pay attention to them. I mean, like say if you go into lambing, if you're going into bedding grounds, you want to see your sheep calm. You want to see them bunched up. You want to see them. But if I go into a pasture during the daytime, they should be spread out really nice through there. But you're just looking for bunches of sheep, or if they're spread out. But I'm not like taking care of the sheep.
Yeah.
I'm trying to locate predators.
You come in and observe where the sheep are, so that you can then identify where the predators are likely to be based on movements, temperament, patterns, and activity. Right? Does that sound right?
Yeah, we'll have pastures that are upwards. Like I got one pasture that's 8,000 acres. One pasture.
Wow. So your job is to protect the flock from predators by trapping or hunting or whatever, what have you. Correct?
Calling, such, yeah. And I used to fly around, and we used to do it in an airplane. I used to hunt them out of an airplane, too.
Oh, yeah, helicopters. I've seen helicopters used, yeah.
So
we would use an airplane, yeah. I've done a little bit of helicopter work, but the airplanes, that's a whole other conversation. If you haven't done that, pay somebody, go do it. They talk about that, the deadliest catcher, catching fish or crabs fly around in the back seat of a cub up in the mountains one time in the rocks chasing coyotes. Try that on for size.
I'm good.
I'll pucker you right up if you don't have a solid constitution.
Oh my gosh, that's awesome.
So while you're out there,
on those big pastures, I spend most of my time. It's all woven wire fence. So to start things out, I run the whole perimeter of that. You might be talking 250 to 300 miles of woven wire fence, give or take.
Wow.
And so I will make sure that all my snares are up and operating on that perimeter. That you're watching that perimeter a lot, right?
Gotcha.
And so then once you've identified coyotes within given pastures, then you've got to make sure if you got a pasture that's either has livestock in it or doesn't have livestock in it, and they rotate those pastures, right?
Gotcha.
And so usually I'll go in and kind of carpet bomb in the spring at least anything that I'm aware of that made it through the first season. I'll go in and carpet bomb. I'm setting up every feature on that property, right? Usually it doesn't take very long. You'll be looking at a week to 10 days. You'll run through most of your animals on the property, and if there's anything left over, you clean that up, but yank all your gear out. A lot of times in the springtime, my lambing pastures are empty, so I can.
So what you're doing by traveling the perimeter, you're identifying game trails. You're looking for places where, points of least resistance where the predator animals are going to travel through, so you know where to set your traps. Is that correct?
Yep.
All right,
awesome.
we got a break here.
Snares predominantly on that fence. It's a snare game on those fences.
Awesome. We got a break coming up, so we're going to come back with Jamie after a message from our sponsors. You guys are listening to Prepper Talk Radio here on K-Talk AM 1640. We'll be right back. Well, welcome back to Prepper Talk Radio, radio for the ready-minded. We've got our buddy here, Jamie Olson from CoyoteHunters.net. CoyoteHunter.net.
Coyote Hunter.
And we're talking trapping. So you've gone through and you've lambed the area. You've kind of cased everything. How do you actually set the traps? Like, is there like a process you go through of identifying where to put it and how to set it, and what types of traps do you use? Keeping in mind, like, you're going after more of the big game. Well, not big game, but coyotes, predators, bobcats. Yeah. Like, what are you going after, and then how are you setting those traps for each of those different species?
Yeah, and basically in the content of us as beginners, we don't know what the heck you're talking about, and how do we, if we're interested, how do we learn about trapping that way? And so just tell us the basics of how we would, if we're looking at a perimeter, we're trying to set, we want to know where to set traps and how and what kind of traps. In particular, I know you're talking about coyotes in particular. So let's run from there.
Right. Yeah, so a couple things. First, on the control side, it's completely different than fur trapping. So people that fur trapping a lot of times don't understand what it is to be a control trapper, and it's kind of a little bit more advanced.
Okay. So
what we'll start with, just to talk about it, bed snaring in most situations is about the easiest way to capture an animal. So I use a very specific type of snare for my fences, and I use a different type of snare for my trail snares.
Okay.
So like on a fence snare, because I believe a 7x7 cable, which is the number of strands per grouping of cable, that's the way it's wound.
Okay.
It makes it form a teardrop shape. And so that snare actually falls really fast. So when a coyote goes through that and that snare touches his shoulders, that snare will fall down on him. Same thing with a red fox or a badger or a raccoon or what have you.
Okay.
On a trail snare situation, I like a rounder loop, not a teardrop loop, because I want a snare that's going to handle the wind a little bit better. I want a snare that when the deer walk through it, all they're going to do is push it out of the way and it swings right back into place. There's some little tricks with this stuff that it's hard to describe without any kind of visual. I do have some videos up on coyotehunter.net. There's also on Facebook. You can find me on Facebook. I got how-to videos on there under coyotehunter.net, and I've also got some stuff on YouTube. But they're just short, little, easy clips. But the snaring is relatively easy. You can buy the snares pre-made, and once you've bought them and used them, it's pretty easy to have a sample and make your own snares. The loop size is going to be dependent on your animal and how they travel.
Okay.
So for like a raccoon, you might have the bottom of the loop 4 inches off the trail. For a rabbit, you might have it 2 inches off the trail. For a coyote, you might have the bottom of the loop 10 to 12 inches off the trail. So knowing your animal and knowing where the bottom of their chin is, somewhere between their kneecap, what would be a kneecap, or the bottom of their chin,
okay.
Where the bottom loop would be, and the top of the loop, obviously, you'd want it above the ears. And you want to catch them around the neck. And with rabbits, we're talking about prepping with food and stuff like that. And me and Scott were talking about this earlier this week. If you have the capability of gathering food, in a
survival scenario,
yeah.
Like rabbits,
the neighbors are going to be coming to you to get food, and there's going to be an opportunity to do some bartering there. On the trap side of it, it's you could just go with either a dirt hole set or just what they call a set post set. Or else it's a flat set, a blind flat set, where it's just in the middle of a trail, and you got like some sort of step-over stick. People can make trapping really difficult. There's books and books and books on methods of trapping.
So the simplest
fur trapping.
So for the beginner, the simplest type of trap, what would you recommend we set? Like if we're we're in a survival situation, we need food.
We need a rabbit.
Like we want to get a rabbit, we want to get something we can eat. What would you tell us to do? And what would be the best way to set it up?
Snares for sure. If you wanted to start with snares, a real small light cable, something that 1/16, 7x7. And with rabbits, it's really easy to start picking up those trails. They leave a lot of scat behind them, little round pellets. And you would want something that probably a 4 to 6 inch loop diameter.
Okay.
And you would hang that just right there in the center of the trail. One of the tricks about snaring is your support system. So how you're supporting that snare over top of the trail. And what I use a little spring they call a whammy. You buy them from other crappie supply houses, and they'll refer to them as a whammy, or else I also use what they call a choke spring. And then a number 9 wire, like fencing.
Okay.
You have a smooth wire that's welded to a rebar stake. I use a 3/8 rebar T-stake. So like when people are putting up a fence post, the little you go around to the Tractor Supply or Murdoch, some sort of tack dealer where they sell fence posts. You can buy these little rebar stakes, really thin diameter, very strong tensile strength, and then I'll weld a piece of support wire under, like 2 foot of number 9 smooth wire. The support system, it's like trapping. So like the most important part about trapping to me is reading the dirt. You have to know how to manipulate that dirt in order to keep your trap running.
Meaning,
so a lot of people miss the bedding part of the trap, and they get too caught up in the lure display.
So you're talking like the meaning like securing it so that it gets sprung in the right place, but also that they can't get away, that they can't dislodge it, that it's secured. Is that what you're kind of talking about, or what do you mean by that?
A couple things. So first of all, if you always have to deal with weather, either sunny, dry, windy weather, or it's rainy, overcast weather. If it's overcast, your set's not going to necessarily dry up very fast. Snow, you may have some sleet, and so not only do you have to know how to set the trap, having a properly dug out trap bed, have nice, fresh, fluffy dirt. A lot of times I bring a special type of coal shale with me in order to keep that trap nice and firm and solidly bedded in that trap location. And so you want a spot. So when I'm walking, like in the wintertime, say for instance, you're walking into an area, the first thing you want to notice is like a macro location. You've got a drainage that you know that there's a particular type of animal that you want to pursue is moving through that drainage. So that's your macro location.
Okay.
Now you have to identify your micro location where you're going to put that trap. So you may not readily see.
So basically where their normal path of entry and exit's going to be.
Yep, because then you can use a quieter lure. So if you put the trap underneath a coyote's nose, you don't have to use when I say quiet or loud, that means how strong that lure is. If the loud lures are really smelly.
Okay.
And so if you have a quiet lure, you're not having a lot of your non-target animals, the ones that you weren't trying to catch, skunks, badgers, that sort of thing.
Okay.
So you want to put that trap underneath your target animal's nose. But you also have to find a location that's going to be working even if it's raining, even if it's been dry and windy. If it's dry and windy, sometimes it dries the soil so bad it blows all the topsoil off of your trap and exposes your trap. Or if it's snowy out, you've got to have a spot that the snow is going to melt and run away from the trap and not refreeze and just you have a block of ice there, right?
Gotcha.
So when you walk through an area, you want to look for the spots, usually like a south-southeast facing on a hill. You're going to have specific areas within that drainage, for instance, that are going to blow off and melt off. So as you're walking through it, you're going to see the black dirt. You're going to see the places that the snow hasn't stuck. Well, that's a good place to put a trap, but it may not put it underneath that animal's nose. So now you have to get that animal from where he is to where you want him to be. And there's some of the things we use for that. It might be a flagging, might be a feather on a wire, with a swivel to draw your animal up in there close enough to smell that lure. Or you could take a really loud lure, skunk essence, beaver castor, for instance, and put that up high, something behind you, and let the wind, put it high and away from your set. But it draws that animal the 30 yards to get him within 5 yards of your set, where you can have your nice quiet lure on like a scent post. Something as easy as having your dog walk with you down a 2-track, a little game trail. Your dog will readily identify all the spots that other animals have peed.
Mm-hmm. That's
animals
true.
Will, right?
I'd never even thought of that. Like, take your dog with you to set your trap lines because they're going to walk where everything else is going to be walking.
So basically, you're talking about bait. What you're talking about, lures, is a type of bait to bring that animal into your trap. Is that correct?
Yep. And it gets to be like when somebody says bait, what I'm thinking about is something that the animal wants to eat, and I will generally want to take a bait and put it down a hole. Mm-hmm. A lure, for instance, would be something I would want up high, per se.
I see.
Now, there's nuances to that, but generally when people are talking, it's the difference between a bait station or a draw station. When they used to run poisons, they would run draw stations for like strychnine, but a bait station for 1080. And so you have these words that people use interchangeably, but the reality of it is they have very specific meanings within this. Yeah,
because you can lure, like you say, you can lure in a coyote with like you say, a feather or something, or a call. You can lure them in with a call, but it's not necessarily a bait where they would get the odor of meat or whatever, which draws them into your trap.
And they're going to approach it differently. Early in the season, like for red fox, it's pretty easy. It's a 3-inch dirt hole, 9 inches deep. You take a piece of fresh meat, throw it in the back of it, maybe a squirt of urine. Simple little deal. The angle of the hole you want.
Any kind of urine? Like,
just not your own.
Well, yeah. Not your own, but like just any.
Funny enough, here's the thing. People get pretty excited about peeing and going to the bathroom, defecating in their hunting areas.
Mm-hmm.
My personal opinion is those animals aren't able to tell the difference from me eating a steak or a coyote eating a rabbit or a deer eating vegetables. I ate some asparagus. I mean, I think it's a little overstated. Back in the day, wolfers, they used to call trappers, and there was a whole profession when they were killing a lot of those buffalo for the hides. The notion that they just left those animals laying out to the rot is kind of a misnomer. There's a lot of things that go into that depending on where they're at. One of the things was it attracted a lot of predators, and the predator population started booming in the 1860s. And then you had guys who were poison guys that were running around and loading up a lot of those carcasses. What was left after the meat and stuff was taken, they'd load them up with strychnine, and they'd have strychnine-based straws.
Because they're just interested in the pelts.
Well,
yep,
and getting rid of the predators because the predators cause problems.
Yep, but the wolfers found that urine worked as an attractant, but they had no way of collecting urine from a coyote, fox, or a wolf. And so a lot of times they were using their own urine. And I've even read stories. You can go back into Voice of the Coyote by Frank Dolby. It was written back in the 40s. And there was a wolf that he talks to, a trapper, a government trapper, and he would wait till his wife was having her menstrual cycle. He would collect that urine from his wife because it has pheromones on it. And in the trapping world, that is called a matrix urine, and it has the presence of pheromones during that cycle. And that's how they would use urine.
Wow.
Nowadays, people are all scared of human urine at locations.
That's incredible. Okay, so he when his wife's on the menstrual cycle, he would collect the urine and he would save that for his traps, for his lines. That's interesting. That's really interesting.
Because some of the research I was doing before our call is that don't use your own urine, your own whatever, for in the area because they can distinguish the difference between a human and say another coyote or something.
I don't know how that's even possible.
Okay,
but I don't believe that's possible. Just the history story right there kind of throws that in the dirt.
Yeah.
There's a trapper I know. He's been a government trapper for decades and decades. Several trapping books, and I'll let him tell the story or at least drop his name. But he said it. He went to pooped and back up against the bush and set a trap in front of it. And he told me he just wanted to try it, but caught a coyote off his own fecal matter.
Well, yes, I mean coyotes are scavengers. They want anything they can get, anything that's an easy target,
and probably curious as well.
Yeah,
the curiosity plays a big part of it. Yeah.
Well, that's like the feather part that we talked about earlier. I mean, it's part
they see some motion, they hear a distress cry or something, and come toward that target and get caught in the trap. Now, we were first talking about snares, and those are obviously placed much differently than traps. Like you say, you were talking about bedding traps, and there's other ways as well to, I guess, snare or trap a predator. But I guess those are the most two common, are snares and actually these metal traps that you see on your cartoons, right, that grab the bear's foot. They're bear traps is what they kind of look like, right? But there are many different sizes and different configurations. And
you can get those at almost, like, a lot of the different hardware stores.
Over to Shields. You go over to Shields. They've got a whole bunch of these traps.
Harbor Freight had some a while ago. Our favorite store, Smith & Edwards.
Oh, yeah, Smith & Edwards
has them. For those of you who are local, Smith & Edwards has them. You can get them in a lot of different places. I mean, I've got some live traps for getting rid of raccoons around my neighborhood, around my yard. But
there's a product called a dog-proof trap for raccoons, and they're pretty much exclusive to raccoons and skunks. It won't catch your dog. It won't catch your cat. And you just jam it in the dirt. It's the easiest trap in the world to set.
It's just a small, like a pipe that they reach their hand in there.
Yep.
Yeah, and get their hand caught in there. I saw those at Shields the other day. Yeah,
there you go.
So if there's anything I've learned here in the first half an hour segment of our show is that trapping is not just set a trap and hope. Right? It's not luck. It's not by chance. Although I'm sure some of that has to play in it. But it sounds to me like you have to know where to place it, the signs to follow, the excrement of the animal, the path where it might cross through down in a gully or whatever, and as well how to, like you say, you have to maybe place something in the trail they have to step over, which will then get them caught in a trap. It sounds very technical at this point. It's not necessarily a game of luck.
It's the kind of once you start to get into predator control, where you're actually working with livestock and you're paying your bills. My mortgage payment is paid with control work.
Wow.
And so you kind of have to. I remember when I first got out here, you're going through all this training. They kind of throw you out the field and hope for the best. And I called my dad up and I told him, I think I'd been out here 3 months, and I said, I don't think I can do this. And he was, we've been hunting our whole lives. He's like, what do you mean you don't think you can do this? I said, I'd get phone calls or a picture of a track. This is no kidding. I remember at Christmas one time, I actually got a picture of a track in the snow and told what pasture it was in. The expectation is for me to be there the next day and find that coyote.
Yeah.
Because there's not like hundreds out here. I can't just go out and shoot a coyote and get a pat on the back. I'm working 95,000 acres and looking for one coyote. Mm-hmm. And so they would send you out in search of this one coyote, and it's really more. And when you would make a mistake, if I call on the coyote and miss, I got to get up the next day and go look for that coyote. And if I don't get it that day, I got to get up the next day and go look for that one coyote again. And it just goes on like that.
So it sounds.
And the expectation is that you're not supposed to miss. You're not supposed to make mistakes. You're a professional. Right. Act like a professional. And it was a little daunting when I first started, because you have to learn. And one thing I've really gotten good at, because I had no choice, but I really thought I was good at reading sign. Mm-hmm. But the sign reading kind of, it's like somebody took the sunglasses off and put on some really good prescription glasses that I always needed, because nowadays I just see things differently.
Yeah, I see
you
that.
Start building entire scenarios based on, why are you seeing ducks on this pond but not seeing ducks on that pond? Why are you seeing skunk tracks over here but you're not seeing badger tracks? Why are you seeing badger tracks over on this pond but just badger tracks?
Absolutely.
You know what I'm saying?
Let's get more into this when we get back. We've got a break coming up right now. For those listening, we're talking trapping. We've got Jamie Olson on with us today. This is Prepper Talk Radio. We've got one more segment coming up. Don't leave. Check out our sponsors, and we'll be right back after their messages. Well, welcome back to Prepper Talk Radio here at K-Talk AM 1640. You can find us at ktalkmedia.com. You can find us directly at preppertalkradio.com, or most of our chatting and stuff goes on at Prepper Talk Radio on Facebook. Mm-hmm. So get on there, follow us, like us. We're going to share some of Jamie's videos that we've talked about. Now, in this last segment, we want to kind of change gears a little bit and talk survival scenario. Mm-hmm. How likely, and if so, how do we use like snares or traps? Like, what would you recommend if we're trying to get food on the table, and we need to start trapping?
We know protein,
snaring. Like, what's the way to go?
Yeah, and we know protein is absolutely essential in our diets, and the quickest, easiest way is going to be to identify the animals in your area, wherever you're at, and learn how to snare them, learn how to trap them, rather than try and shoot them.
Yeah, and the trapping can be. I mean, you're trying to talk an animal and putting his foot on a little piece of dirt. Mm-hmm. I think the snaring, especially when a person is starting out, the inexpense snares can run anywhere on the low side, 75 cents to $1.25 a piece. Most of the parts on that snare are reusable, except for the cable itself.
And they're light enough to put in a pack and carry with you pretty much everywhere you go.
Dozens of them at a time.
Yeah, yep, whereas a trap, they can get heavy, especially if you're carrying more than a couple. So, yeah, snares are obviously the way to go.
Much better option.
Yep.
Now, if you're trying to eat, and you're trying to eat from what you're catching, I mean, how many snares do you put out? Like, what would you go through the process with us? What's the mindset? Like, if you want a rabbit a day, how many snares do you really have to put out?
Oh, I wouldn't think much. 6 to 12. Usually what the problem gets to be is trying to make sure that your snare is operating when the target animal arrives. And so it's easy to find travel ways for particular animals, but you need to find a travel way that just that animal is using, as opposed to all the deer, all the skunks, everything.
So you can't just find a game trail. You've got to find the game trail of the rabbit. Or of whatever it is you're going after.
Yep. And that's what I was saying as far as like scouting and stuff like that. Allow that ground, allow the ground to tell you what's going on, and you'll even find like different color of sunglasses. So the tinted ones are one thing, but when you have a cloudy day and you're looking for tracks, typically what we use are amber or some sort of yellow lens.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
And on a cloudy day where you lose a little bit of your depth perception with that color of tint, it makes the tracks jump out at you. Really? Another thing, when you're walking and scouting to find these animals, the grass will lay one way and as it lays away from you, is easier to see than when the grass is laying towards you.
Right.
So when you have an animal that's creating a trail, sometimes you have to walk that trail in two different directions to see what's really going on, because the sun will hit even a track, even a small rabbit track will have some of the edges a little bit higher, right? And you will pick little shadows off that. So you can walk down the trail and not see any tracks, put on a pair of yellow sunglasses, now all of a sudden you may see some tracks, maybe you don't. You come down the trail the other direction and have the sun at a different angle, and now all of a sudden tracks that you couldn't see before and that you weren't aware of are going to start jumping out at you. And being able to identify the size of the toes, whether or not it's going to have an exposed nail, whether or not the two middle toes are close together, far apart. And so once you start able to identify the track of the animal the track, the scat of the animal that you're focused on, let's say it's rabbits, you could carry dozens and dozens and dozens of those small snares, and you could even set them up with a stop button so it doesn't actually even kill the animal, and then you could take them back and pen them, and you would have a breeding population, so you wouldn't have to be out there in the dead of winter trying to catch animals.
Oh, wow. So you could really, that's what I wanted to hear.
Yeah.
You can really take the population of animals that you're finding, then take them back and breed them so that you're creating your own livestock. I mean, that's the thing about rabbits that I love is like you get two females and a male, and all of a sudden you're putting out more meat in a year than a new calf will put out. Like you're in the meat, but you just got to be able to pen them, keep them separated, and stuff like that. And that's not hard to do once you've got them. But getting them and getting out and understanding how to find them and how to do that. I think I love this conversation because it's so valuable. A lot of us think, I can just go trap animals, or I'll just set up some snares, and without actually understanding the mechanics of the snare, and then more importantly, the mechanics of the animal, like where they live, what's the culture like in the area that they are, like how does the grass lay, what's the dirt telling us where they're going, understanding their sign. If we don't understand that, you can't just set up a snare and catch something.
And here's my question to you: is that we think about this sounds to me pretty complicated. It's going to take a lot of time to practice. So we always hear train, practice, practice. But why not me just sit out there with my 223 and pick off rabbits and that's not a good round for a rabbit.
I'm like, what the heck?
But for coyotes or whatever, and just there would be left to eat.
Hey, look, there's an ear. I found the ear. That's all.
Yeah, sit out there with my 22 and
Dad,
pick off rabbits.
Eat an ear.
Or what's the benefit of using traps or snares over just hunting, shooting?
The noise.
Okay.
I think a big part is that a lot of times so here's the thing. I always joke around with my friends about this. My idea of prepping is find out which one of my neighbors have a good supply of food and water.
There you go.
I'm going to go borrow some stuff from them, right? I've got
air quotes.
Anyway, it's more of a joke than anything. But you really, if you're in one of those situations, you probably don't want to make everybody aware of where you're at and what you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
And if somebody starts associating a gunfire with food, similar to what we have the problem in Wyoming here with grizzlies right now that aren't scared of rifle fire, you shoot a gun. You have one guy gutting, the other guy's watching the trail to shoot the bears as they come running after you. So it wouldn't be any different. I guess if you had a situation where everybody's out there trying to fend for themselves, for me personally, I wouldn't want to deal with a gunshot unless I had to.
Okay,
especially for catching rabbits every day long.
Yeah,
so that would. But on the sound side of it, though, it is a good idea to know how to make sounds, know how to call on animals or to scare animals off, know what sounds are. If you hear a sound, that you know what it is, you're able to identify it and have somewhat of a clue what's going on around you. I think most people just think the wilds are all sterile and it's like some sort of park. But even like the rabbits, they have fleas. So one of the reasons why if you had a breeding population of your own, maybe you'd have an opportunity to control the fleas. But what we have out here is that the fleas will carry staphylococcus and tularemia. And Staphylococcus is kind of like a Lyme disease sort of thing that once you have it, you have it. And if you become in a weakened state, it can flare up, like malaria will. And so there's also, you not only need to know how to catch the food, you got to know how to prepare it and be aware of what sort of parasites can be on each particular animal. Gophers are notorious for plague, prairie dogs, that sort of thing. And people can eat prairie dogs and would eat prairie dogs, but you got to at least be aware of the fact that you got to wear gloves, and then you have to properly clean them and kill the parasites that are on them, and then you can prep them for eating on. Otherwise, you're just creating another problem for yourself.
So you're saying plant a garden is what you're really.
It's not a bad idea.
That's what I hear.
Deal with the potato bug.
Stockpile your rice and beans and plant a garden.
Potatoes.
There you go.
That's what I hear.
Plant a garden. Put a woven wire fence around it. Create holes for the rabbits to go through.
There you
occasionally
go.
put snares up and snare your rabbits as they're coming into your garden.
There you go.
There we go. That works.
That's your draw station.
Yeah.
And you don't necessarily have to be so picky about all the reading the sign and reading the tracks, because you're creating a food source and a limited access on which they can get to it. So the deer are going to step over it. So if you have a trail and you don't want a deer to get caught in the snare, they have they call them like a step over stick, and you can lay a branch across the trail. The deer will jump over it, and everything else will go underneath it, and your snare is underneath of it.
So there's lots of intricate things, it sounds like, to keep your traps in place until they catch what they're meant to catch, instead of be turned over or you're stepped on and then no longer effective. So it sounds like an awful lot to learn, a lot of practice needs to happen, for me at least.
So if anyone wants
the snaring, I can make you a pretty good snare man in about 15 minutes, as long as we had all the tools and in the right location. Snaring would definitely be somebody that's wanting to prepare for that sort of thing. That would be something you could pick up and be proficient at it, at least enough to feed yourself.
See, my plan has been I basically carry around a slingshot. It's quiet.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty good with it. And I think I could hit a rabbit. I haven't practiced because I'm just not that kind of person. I'm not going to go out and shoot rabbits for practice.
I've tried, though, man. I've tried. It's really tough. That is a tough endeavor, killing rabbits with a slingshot. I'm pretty accurate with the thing too. Mm-hmm. I don't know. That is not something I'd want to depend on to feed myself.
In my younger years, my misspent youth, we had a huge gopher population and rabbit population in the field behind my house, growing up in Colorado. And I had my little slingshot, wrist rocket style, and I would take rocks. I would take the large BBs, years, and I never hit a single thing.
Never hit one.
I could hit a branch an inch in diameter and hit the right one that I'm looking for.
But it wasn't moving.
But I could not, even a gopher just standing at its hole.
Couldn't do it.
When I'm thinking it's got its back to me, I got it. No. Those little punks, they have the sixth sense. They're like, oh, he's over there. He's going to shoot me. I'm going to wait until he's ready. Goodbye. They just disappear right when it's time. But rabbits, they're always moving.
Buck fever.
Yeah, and it's just
buck fever.
2 years of trying, and I'm like, screw this. But I've hit birds.
And I guess that's true. As a young teenager, you grab Dad's .22 and you go out in the desert with a bunch of friends trying shooting rabbits, right? Because it's always open season on the hares, right? And so even then, that's extremely hard to hit a rabbit.
Squirrels with a BB gun works really well, though.
I have done that.
I've got a history of that. We'll have to tell that in another time.
The nice thing about the snares are nice because you can just get up in the morning, go run a snare line, collect what you've got.
And I guess the more the better is really the philosophy there.
Now, how often should you be checking your line? Are you worried about predators getting to your line and getting the food?
Yeah. It definitely depends on the time of season and the type of animal you're catching with the type of tool that you're using, because it can vary. Like with snares out here, they have upwards to a 13-day check. You have to check it once every calendar week. And so on coyotes in the wintertime, it's just going to kill them, and when you get there, they're frozen. Mm-hmm. There's no catch and release with them. Like foothold traps, oddly enough, usually you're talking, depending on the animal, if I'm using a foothold, a regular jump trap with raccoon, I'm checking that every 24 hours. Right, if I'm trying to catch coyote, though, 3 to 5 days is really more reasonable, because the amount of ground that a coyote covers, the amount of animals that you have on that particular portion of your line, it doesn't make any sense to be in there. It's a detriment to be checking it often. Right. But with raccoons,
but if you want to eat,
you need to check it often.
And if you want to eat, you got to check them every day too, right?
So eating's more snares.
Rabbits for sure.
Getting rid of predators more The traps.
The traps. And, yeah, don't worry about checking them because the animal's going to die on the trap anyway, right?
Yeah.
Well, the snare they will, not the trap. The trap you're going to want to get in there. And because the nice thing about traps, if it's not an animal you want, you can let it go. They're not like the traps that you see in the cartoons. They don't. Mine are offset, mean they have a gap in them. So they don't even close all the way.
I see, okay.
And they're laminated, so it doesn't put as much pressure on the paw. So there's a lot of times where I'm able to let animals go.
It traps them and then doesn't break anything.
What do you do? How do you let them go? Like, I'm thinking bobcat pissed off. Like, how do you, do you throw a giant canvas tarp? Like, what do you do? How do you let them go?
With the cats, you use a choke pole. So it's a 4-foot pole with a cable on it, and I grab them by the neck and I choke them down. I'll step on the pole to hold them down. Mm-hmm. I'll let the trap off, and I pop the release on the choke pole, and he'll go wandering off. A fox, you just tap him on the nose, it knocks him out. You let him go that way. Badgers, if you wrap them on the nose, halfway between the nose and the eyes, you give them a pretty good knock, it will stun them. And they make this barking noise. They'll go cut, 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 cut. This real coughing noise. And you can take them out of the trap and pick them up by the scruff of the neck like a cat.
I would never even want to try that.
For a badger?
I'm over here going, badger.
My last question for you as we run out of time here is kind of going back to the beginning of where we started is obviously it sounds like a hard life, honestly. Spending every day in the mountains, covering lots of land, lots of ground. Would you ever go back to the 9-to-5 job?
No, man. I don't have a backup plan. This has to work for me.
Awesome. Well, Jamie,
I'm pretty entrenched in this.
Thank you so much for joining us today here on Prepper Talk Radio. You've been awesome. We can find you on Facebook, but also you said coyotehunter.net. Thank you.
FoxCreekOutfitters.com.
There we go. So, guys, check him out. He's got some videos. We're going to share those on our social media, but thanks for tuning in today. You've been listening to Prepper Talk Radio.
See you, Jamie. Thanks.
Does your dog itch, scratch, stink,